Welcome back again to Photoshop Tutorials, and this time we'll be looking at green screen removal. I've seen a number of green screen tutorials on Photoshop about how to remove the green screen, and surprisingly, I haven't seen one that actually talks about it the right way. We know that there are selection tools and all kinds of things within Photoshop, but these really are not the things to use if you want to do it professionally. So I'll show you how to do it the real way, which will, generally speaking, yield the best results and will also be the easiest to do. Now, if you saw previous tutorials, especially the blue screen removal, this one's going to work in very much the same way. So you can refer to that one, but again, we're going to turn to the channels and have a quick review of what's going on there. So we have, of course, our red, our green, and our blue. Looking at these channels should really give you some very interesting information. You might be wondering why we do green screen now. It, of course, used to be blue screen for background removal and compositing a long time ago. And that was because it was done with cameras and optical compositing, and the blue had special properties. Now, green has special properties when we are dealing with digital cameras. The digital camera sensors really pick it up quite well. And something nice is that the green tends to be clearer and have less noise than the blue channel. So that's one of the reasons that it's used quite a bit now. Of course, you can still use blue screen for background removal, as I showed recently in that previous tutorial. So either one will work, but there's a reason we use green screen quite a bit now. It has a lot to do with digital cameras and how they see the color green. So once again, we're going to look at our channels here. Notice that there's a really great definition right around here between the green and this foreground, the hair especially. We've almost got a mask edge just as it is. Now remember, of course, when we're making a mask, we don't really care about the inside parts. We can easily get rid of that with a garbage mat or something. But we're really more concerned about these edges right here. So the green we definitely want, but it doesn't give us this inside information. If we look at the red gives us this inside information that we need, but in reverse. So notice how the red gives us these nice highlights here. The background goes dark, the hair goes dark here, and we get what's happening here in reverse. So we need to combine both of these channels. This is going to be very similar to what we did previously with the blue screen removal using calculations. We're going to combine both channels and calculate them together to give us the end result. So again, I would suggest that tutorial. It gives a bit more information in depth, but I'm just going to show you how those same principles apply to the green screen removal. So of course we need to use the two channels. We're not going to use the blue for the blue screen. So instead of using blue and red for green screen removal, we actually need green and red. So those are the two that are important to us. So I'll go here and I'll click on my RGB and once again go to Image and Calculations, a feature which has been in Photoshop for a long time, almost from the very beginning, for this very point of taking two images or channels, calculating them together, and spitting out a result. So again, the default should say probably red, and multiply. So we know we want the red. We also need to do the green. It doesn't matter which channel is which here. So there we go, red and green. Now if you recall, we're also talking about we need the inverse of the red. The red had just the opposite of the information we needed. So the nice thing here is there's this invert button for each channel. I'll invert the red, and we end up with this. Pretty good. You can see how multiplying the inverse of the red, of course white goes transparent in multiply, so we lost anything out here, but it really gives us this dark stuff. Now multiply is this default, and it's not bad, but we also need to know we need a little bit of stronger effect right here. And if we look at our darkening blend modes, there are other ones which are stronger and better, kind of like multiply on steroids. So if I come down here to color burn, you can see we get that, which is pretty amazing. And this is, of course, doing it really programmatically. It's just Photoshop calculating these numbers out. If you do things like this with After Effects or other compositing programs, this is kind of what it's doing behind the scenes, using information like this. So notice how there's a bit of white right here. That's not a problem, but the reason it's there is that color burn cannot appear over pure white. In very much the same way, color dodge cannot appear over pure black. So we can easily take care of that, Or we could also try linear burn, which is very similar, but linear burn will appear over pure white. So let's check that one and see what that looks like. So, of course, it's covered up in here, which is nice, but it's also darkened up this background. And we may have lost some detail. So with the more contrast we have between the foreground and the background, the better off we'll be. So I'll go back here and click Color Burn. See, and we're going to have more information to work with there. And of course, the result is a new channel, and click OK. Great, there's our new channel, Alpha 1. Alpha, of course, meaning transparency in computer graphics. So very easily here, I'm just going to hit D to get my default colors and make a quick selection around this white area here, and then just fill with black. Great. Deselect that right there. Looking good. So we'll need to do a levels adjustment because we want the inside to be pure black, which I'm pretty sure it already is, but this background here needs to be pure white. So Command L for levels, grab the white eyedropper, and I usually like to start at the lightest areas right here. There we go. And we get that. Now it might not be pure white up here if I scroll up a bit, but I really don't care because I can easily chop that off. Not really concerned about that. Anyway, I'm concerned about this right here. I might zoom in a little bit and look around. I can see some non-white areas here, so I'm going to click those and make sure those go white. There, that's good. And so we see that our white slider is slid all the way from here over to here, which is a value of 128 from 255. So that's pretty good. Looking down here, oh, we got a bit more. Let's see if we can take care of that. There we go. So again, I'm not concerned about any white way out here, but in here I would be. I wanted to have a nice clear edge and nothing there kind of messing it up. So you can see that we're getting some decent hair detail, I think. If I grab the black slider and check, this is already black at 0, so I don't need to move that anymore. If I were to do that, I'd probably lose detail in the hair. So I'll zoom out a bit here. Looking good. That's probably what I want, and I'll say OK. So very quickly there, I might see a little bit of white in there, so I would just grab a real quick selection right there. Make sure I have default colors and fill with black. This is what's called a core matte. And if you had to fix anything out here, for example, if I were to come out here like this and just kind of drag, oop, that's a little too close because I grabbed some of that. Oh, I don't want to save. Command D, not Command S. We'll go up to the white top and fill that with white. Make sure that's pure white, and also along here on the edges too, because sometimes you can get a little pixel of strange things happening. I think I see a little pixel of black right there. So I'm going to get rid of that and deselect. Okay, so we see that, and looking good there. Ready to make our mask in Photoshop. So I can either click the load selection button right here, or it's Command or Control click. Control would be the PC, Command is the Mac. Right there on the thumbnail, click on that, and it loads a selection. I'll go back to RGB, click on my layers, and make a mask. Of course, it's the inverse of what I needed because it's white and black, not black and white. So I can just do Command I for inverse, Control I on the PC. On that, right on the mask, and we're good to go. Really great mask. Look at all that detail it kept in the hair. Looking really good. And I think it's just what I'm looking for there. And of course, it took zero effort. We're not using any selection tools. We're not doing quick select, select and mask, or any kind of junk like that. We're using the channels for what they were designed to be used for. Now, another quick thing that you might want to know, let's grab this and do a real quick composite, a real quick sort of A over B. I've got a background here. Grab this and pop that in, and there we go. Oh, he's down there really kind of small. We'll kind of zoom in on this image and see our guy hiding down here. And what you might see, especially if I come up here a little bit, let's kind of move him up like this. There we go. What you might see is some green here along the edges. You see that green line? This is green spill. It's a very common thing to see with green screen background because the green screen is lit and it needs to be evenly lit so there are no shadows or anything. It needs to be quite bright so that you can easily remove the background there using whatever tools that you're going to use. Channels in Photoshop and other keying types of tools in After Effects and other programs. But it tends to leave a bit of green here. Sometimes you might even have green reflecting on parts of your image if it's close enough to the green screen background and there's enough light bouncing around. But we don't really like this green edge here because as we're trying to composite this together, this is really going to cause a problem and show you that it came from a different kind of background. So we want to clean up this green edge or green spill. Now there are tools that do this automatically in compositing programs. In Photoshop we have to kind of go about it and use another tool. What I want to show you here with this is an adjustment layer. So I'll come here and grab an adjustment layer. And of course we should recognize these. I'm going to use a very commonly used one, and that is hue saturation. Of course, hue saturation lightness of all things. And we're back. So anyway, hue saturation lightness. So what we want to look at is adjusting this. Now if you take the saturation down, we're going to clip this so it affects just this one layer. If you take the saturation down, we can get rid of that green there, but of course it takes the saturation down of our entire layer. Now we don't want to do that. I'd like to see if I could just kind of target that green and remove just that. Well, there actually is a way to do that. It's been built in here for a long time, even though you might not know it. So look in your properties panel. This is of course hue saturation and lightness, which you should never use. But come here to where it says master. Master means as you adjust this, all the colors are going to change. This whole ramp of hues right here. But if you click on that, you can come here and you can limit the range that it adjusts. So if I come here and I click greens, it's put a little bit of adjustment here where it's going to clip just this area of greens and then fade out there towards the warm yellow, fade out there towards the cool blue. But it's going to adjust just this level, just this area of greens right here. So check out what happens when I take the saturation and I move it down. What you can see is the green is being removed from this edge here. If I take it down more, look at that. It's practically disappearing, which is really nice. If there were any bit of green here reflecting in this area, it would adjust that as well. So I can reduce the saturation, which is good. I also could adjust perhaps the hue and take it a little bit more towards the color in my background. Since this background is very blue, I could take this a bit more towards blue. So I'm kind of tinting it a little bit blue. Let's see if we take that back up. You can see it kind of going a bit bluer. But really what I want to do is I want to reduce the saturation. Maybe not to 0, but down pretty low. As I look at that, already it's looking really pretty darn good right there. So I'm liking that a lot. Let's just turn this off to see it before. So that little green edge right there, and then take it down, and now we have that done. So that really is a great simple way of getting rid of that green spill along the edge. Maybe I'll adjust it down just a little bit more, about -91. So that's looking good. Now we've got a great background removal right here, which is looking really nice, and it's fitting in well. Well, not quite. So we've done the background removal, but just for a little bit more of kind of a compositing bit of tutorial, let's look and see what it would take to make this image work well with the background, because right now it doesn't quite fit. And before I do anything, perhaps you have done this a bit before, but I would right click and turn this layer into a smart object. That way I can apply any filters or other things that would be non-destructive. We always want to work non-destructive as much as possible. So to make this work, the best thing we want to do is look at color and value adjustments. Those are the first things to make these match. So I see that my background photo is a bit grainy and the contrast is a bit low. We might expect this guy here to be a bit more in contrast, and that's fine, but he's very high key and the background is very much lower in contrast. So I might want to take and just adjust this contrast a little bit. So I'd come over here to my adjustment layers, and I'm going to try curves, because curves is a really much better, more powerful adjustment than just doing levels. Again, I want to clip it to make sure it affects just this layer right here. And I always like to use, I always have some kind of update. All right. So anyway, I always want to try and use this targeted adjustment tool, this little finger here. Because I can come here and I can pick a value right there on that layer, and it gives me that value right there on my curves graph. I'll come here to the dark areas and pick, and gives me a value right there. And so I know I can adjust these values exactly and not have to guess where they are. Now, the way curves works is that these values here, left to right, are the values in that layer from dark to light. And this 45-degree angle represents no change. It means that I haven't changed the values yet. If any point here goes up above that 45-degree line, then it gets lighter. If that point goes below, it gets darker. And what you end up with is usually some kind of curve, which is why we call these curves. So if I want to reduce the contrast here, which is usually the opposite of what we're trying to do, but in this case I want to reduce it, I'm going to click this first point right here, just click that, which represents these bright values here, and use the down arrow on my keyboard and move that down. So these will get a little bit darker. And then I would click this dark point right here and move that up, and that'll get a little bit lighter. And so I've now just sort of adjusted those values just a little bit. So we'll take that off, we'll see there, and we'll see right there. So we're kind of reducing some contrast to make this guy, fit in there a little bit better. And it's adjusted the color a bit. The main thing you want to see with your curves is as this line goes from left to right, it should always be going uphill. If it ever goes flat or downhill, you'll get weird color things happening. And you may have seen that. Now I might want to come here and get these mid-tone values. Maybe click right there on the mid-tone and take that up a little bit just to kind of even out some of this stuff. But I really have reduced the contrast just a little bit here. And I could also maybe try something like from full on RGB, go to blue, and kind of click some of these values right here, and take the blue, just move up my up arrow key on the keyboard, move that up a little bit, and we're kind of making that a little bit more blue to kind of fit in with this blue look here. Not too much, but sometimes just a little hint will be fine. Now something else I noticed is there's a good bit of noise right here in the background, and it's not quite as sharp as this image right here. So I could click on this layer, and a very common thing to do is to add noise. And you wonder why there's a add noise filter in Photoshop. Usually you're trying to get rid of noise. Add noise is for when you composite things like this, and you need to put a little bit of noise back in. And we can do monochromatic, or we can uncheck that and give us a little bit of color, and then click on there. You can see I'm putting a little bit of noise in there, and maybe I'll put a little bit more than I think I need, like that. Okay. And then I'll come in and then filter, do a blur and a Gaussian blur. So Gaussian blur is really nice just to kind of soften this up a little bit. Often when you're doing compositing here, you want just a little bit of blur, sometimes less than a pixel. Just less than a pixel can really kind of make that work well. And you're not trying to make it blurry exactly, but you're trying to make it sort of match whatever background you're putting it into. So I'm going to maybe take that, maybe about 0.6 of a pixel looks okay. There we go. That being said, looks like my my noise is a bit too much. So let me just double click on my add noise and just take it back down a little bit. Maybe to about there, maybe 0.4. Okay, so just a little bit of noise in there that makes it look like it fits a bit more into that background. So there we are, just a little bit of compositing going on. We'll turn off those filters, and we can see without that, and turn them on. Just a little bit of softness helps bring it into this image here. So that's some quick and easy compositing in Photoshop with the background removal and just a little bit of adjustments, and a big thing is going to be noise and blur. Whatever is happening on the background here, whatever you put in, especially if it's CG, which is going to be nice and sharp and not have any noise to begin with, you're going to want to add a bit of noise and blur to make things work together and look like they're supposed to be in the same scene, the same plane. You could also use filters like film grain and add grain. Can do a very similar thing to add noise, just a bit more variation there. But the big thing is going to be background removal with the green screen. Remember to use those calculations. It'll give you that great masked edge, really nice detail there without having to resort to the amateur tools that a lot of these tutorials will trick you into using. You want to use the real thing, the real tool, that's going to be channels and calculations so that your work will look as good as it can. Hope you've enjoyed and learned from this, and stay tuned for the next tutorial.